Yo, what's going on, everybody? Hope all is well. So, y'all, how do you think outside of the box? That's the question today for today's episode. And if you have not hit the follow button, make sure you do on this podcast because when you do, you'll never miss a moment to rewire the way you think. If you go outside of this episode, if you're listening to it, there is a follow button at the top of the episode of the podcast. You hit that follow button. Once you hit that follow button, every time a brand new one drops, you get an alert that there's a new episode. It's like your reminder that you need to continue your self development, your self growth, your self improvement. That's what this podcast is all about. So, anyways, though, question for y'all: how do you think outside the box? It's a good question. I went to this leadership seminar a couple years ago, and Greg Gaucher happened to be there. And if you don't know who Greg Gaucher is, hope I'm not messing it up, Greg Gaucher, he said something to the effect that when they asked, how do you think outside the box? His response was, is that you set perimeters, however you want to say it. And the reason why he said that in that manner is because he said that his example is that, have you ever told someone think outside the box? And they said yes. And he said, okay. And they gave you this drastic response. He goes, that's the reason why they gave you a drastic response, because thinking outside of the box has no parameters. And because it has no parameters, now your outside of the box thinking puts you way in left field versus keeping you within the field itself. Right. And so he was saying that, yes, it's okay to think outside of the box, but make sure you have a perimeter about how far you're going to think outside the box. And I have to agree with that because I've been put in predicaments before when someone said, hey, Coach James, I got a question for you. And I need you to think outside the box, right? And they asked me the question. And my response, I get them the most off the wall response because when someone says think outside of the box, to me, it feels like they're saying be more creative than anyone else in this world. And so because they're saying be more creative than anyone else in this world, I got to give you a creative response. with no parameters, right? And so that's why when someone say think outside the box, you must have parameters around it. That way you don't give an off the wall or left field, way on left field answer, because your response still needs to be logical, right? It still needs to make sense to those around you. So how do I think outside the box? I set parameters for myself. Like there's this wall and there's this wall. And my answer is only going to stay within the frame of that wall. It's not going to go over the frame anymore. It's going to stay within the frame. A lot of times when people say think outside of the box, not only do we try to be extra alidocious, fergalicious, fergalicious, creative, it also takes our mindset to another level to where it makes us question our ability for logical thinking, right? Because how logical do you think when someone say think outside the box? And then if you feel like you're in this small box of logic, then you start to think, wait, maybe I'm not smart enough to answer this question outside of the box, right? And because you feel like you're not smart enough to answer the question outside of the box, you kind of freeze for a moment and you're like, um, I don't know. I don't know what to say or do. I don't know what my response should be because now you're stuck trying to come up with a logical response outside of the box. And now it makes you second guess your intelligence, right? And we all know that when you second guess your intelligence, you can't come back from that once you in that moment, right? I've done that before where I second guessed my intelligence and I wasn't able to come back in that moment because now I freaked out about what my response should sound and look like. But how do you think outside the box? What do you do when someone asks you a question and you need to think outside the box. Do you think of logic? Do you think of numbers? Do you think of vocabulary? Do you think of statements? Do you think of mantras? What is it that you do when someone says, how do you think outside the box? Right? Back to my response. There's these walls that I put up and I don't go over. I stay within these walls. Right? And then within my walls, there's a logical spectrum of how logical did I need to be. Right? And then I start thinking like, what's logical and what's not logical from our response. And I'm like, that's not logical. That's actually don't sound smart and intelligent at all. And so y'all, I'll tell y'all one thing that I've changed when it comes to myself is that when I give a response or I think of something in my mind, I no longer say, James, you're stupid. Why'd you think of that? Because then your brain, your mindset is sets you're stupid, and then you program your brain to stupidity. And so now every time you have to respond to something, you be like, I'm stupid, and then you feel like that you can't answer the question. So back to what I was saying, y'all, is that when it comes to that, I no longer say, James, you're stupid. I say that wasn't smart. I was donating plasma a couple years back, and I was doing it just for the money. The money's not bad when you donate plasma. I don't know if y'all know that or not, but it's not bad. It was like an extra $400 or $500 a month in some cases. It just depends on what they were offering for that week for donations. And I would go twice a week. One thing about when you donate, you got to make sure you hydrated. You got to make sure you eat a healthy meal full of protein, and you got to make sure you have some healthy fats. Because if not, once you donate, you're going to be completely depleted, right? You're not going to have no energy. You're going to have a throbbing headache, which would happen to me when I wasn't fully nutritionally ready to donate that day, right? I would still go and I would still pass the exam, not exam, I would still pass the medical tests that they give you before you donate, right? Because that's each time they do that. But I would still pass the medical part. Like they would test your blood sugar, they would test your protein count, they would test your glucose levels, your blood pressure, your weight, and some other things they would check in your blood cells and all that, right? And so y'all, yeah, it was pretty much all that. But at one point, when you get done donating, if there's a bed weight, you're supposed to take your bed weight card because each section has a color on it, and that's where you go, and that's the section you go to donate, right? And so the card is a symbolization of the color of the section you're going to donate in, right? And when you go to that section, there's an open bed, you get on that bed, and then you keep that card. When you get done donating, you take that card, and if there is a line waiting, you hand that card to someone. If there's no bed wait line, you take that card and you slip it in their little return box, right? Well, this day it was someone waiting in the bed line to donate, and I took the card and I put it inside the box, and I should have handed it to the person that was waiting. And the first thing I thought to myself was like, that wasn't smart. And so I take the card out the box and I go hand to the guy. I say, man, I wasn't being smart right now. Aha. Y'all see how I did that? I didn't say, James, that was stupid or you're stupid. I said I wasn't being smart right now. Right? Doesn't mean you're not smart. Doesn't mean you're stupid. Just in that moment, you weren't being smart with whatever decision you made. Right? So I want y'all to reframe or rephrase the way you talk to yourself, because when you talk to yourself with intelligence, you're more intelligent. But when you talk to yourself like you're not intelligent, then the only brain waves that your mind is going to give your brain is that you're not intelligent. And then it falls along the lines of you have a low IQ. You're not smart. You're stupid. And that's not the mindset or the thought process that any of us should have about ourselves, no matter what you've been through. No matter what you've been through. So change the way you speak about yourself. It should be impeccable words only. I am smart. I wasn't being smart in that moment. I didn't make the best decision then, but I'm going to make a better decision next time. I am intelligent. I just wasn't intelligent when it comes to that. I was a little ignorant about the full knowledge of it. Those are the words we should be speaking, not negative words. But anyways, so y'all, how do you think outside the box? And so that's where I was going with that question. I was bringing up how my words help me build my intelligence versus tearing myself down. But back to my example, y'all. So here's the wall, right? And when someone tell me to think outside of the box, here's my wall. I don't go outside of my wall, like I said. I stay within my walls. And then there's my level of logic, right? I make sure that I stay within a certain level of logic ability. And then when I put the logic and then between my parameters, my walls, I can now come up with a logical answer that's outside of the box instead of an answer that don't sound so smart from my mouth, right? And so when you think outside of the box, what do? Do you write it down? Do you get on your cell phone and put on your notepad? By the way, y'all, my notepad and my cell phone is so full right now. Everything somebody tells me, I put it in my notepad, especially if I want to remember it. Like my notepad is almost like my second brain. It's almost like my second brain. It's probably going to be full of memory next when it comes to memory. Next week, I'm going to be extending my memory with it, or over my memory is what I should say, full to capacity to where I'm about to buy more memory, right? Or more storage space is what I should say. But but anyways, y'all. So my notepad is like my second mind in my brain. I keep everything on my notepad. So how do you come up with logical responses when someone asks you to think outside of the box? And the thing about outside of the box responses doesn't mean you're not smart. It doesn't mean you're not intelligent enough. It's just that you're giving a response at that point in time based on what you think they're answering you. You're trying to put too much creativity in it without looking at it from constraints, with logic, and staying within your parameters of your logic ability, right? So, so how do you respond when someone tells you to think outside of the box? Do you freeze up? When someone asks you a question and they say, I want more from that question, and you kind of like, uh, I don't know how to answer that question. Or do you respond quickly with a response and you have logic built into your response? I want y'all to really marinate on that for the next couple of days because you're going to get put in scenarios where someone asks you to think outside of the box and respond to something. And hopefully, when you respond, it could have parameters and have logic ability built into it. Okay. And don't ever, like I said, use the words, I'm dumb or I'm stupid. It's just the right then and there at that point in time, your response wasn't the smartest response. That's all it means. All right. So y'all got a lesson in how to think outside the box, and y'all got a lesson about speaking impeccable words to yourself that will not diminish your intelligence. So y'all, thank y'all for listening to today's episode. I really, really appreciate it. If you have not followed the podcast, make sure you do so. When you hit that follow button, you'll never miss a moment to rewire the way you think. Don't forget to hit the follow button. I just said, don't hit the follow button. Don't forget to check out my website. It's www.rewirethewayouthink.com. Go follow me on IG. I'm there every day, all day. If you want to find me, it's Fast Forward Mindset Podcast. If you're having thoughts of suicide or thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else, please don't hesitate to call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988. Hey, y'all, I'm Coach James, and I hope this message helps you rewire the way you think. And as I always say, if your mindset isn't making you money, it's costing you way too much. And that's my 2 cents in there, y'all. Peace. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode. And remember, don't rewind your life, fast forward it. Until next time, keep moving forward. Hey, y'all, I'm Coach James. Let me help rewire the way you think. All right, y'all. Peace.